So now, there's an interesting story of success from the auto sector there. Specifically, the release of a new electric vehicle produced by a local manufacturer is being hailed as an interesting move for a country that's been more synonymous with subsistence agriculture, conflict and political unrest.
Something happened in Burkina Faso that almost no one saw coming. The Sahel nation officially began producing its own solar-powered electric cars. Yes, electric cars. Assembled on Burkinabe soil by Burkinabe technicians inside a brand new factory in Ouaga 2000. The project, launched under President Ibrahim Traoré, introduced a new automotive brand called Itawa, marking the first time in the country's history that modern vehicles were built locally instead of being imported secondhand. For a nation long dependent on costly fuel, aging foreign cars and fragile transportation lines, this wasn't just a technological upgrade. It was a turning point. Few outside the country took it seriously at first, until the first vehicles hit the streets and proved they were not prototypes, not experiments, but fully functional electric models designed for African roads. That left everyone asking the same question. How did Burkina Faso manage to build an electric car industry from scratch? Let's find out. For decades, Burkina Faso's roads told the same familiar story. Rusting old Peugeots, imported second-hand taxis, engines coughing through the dust, and drivers relying on vehicles that had already lived full lives in Europe before being shipped to West Africa. No one, absolutely no one, imagined that this same country would one day watch a brand new electric car roll out of a factory built on its own soil. But that is exactly what happened in January 2025. When the Itawa electric vehicle assembly plant quietly opened its doors in Ouaga 2000. What made the moment so striking was not just the car itself, but the disbelief on people's faces. Burkina Faso had never assembled modern cars. The world never associated the Sahel with electric mobility, solar charging, or zero-emission vehicles. To most observers, EV production was something that belonged to China, Europe, or the US. Not a landlocked African nation battling fuel dependency and economic pressure. Yet there it was. A fully electric, solar-supported Itawa Sahel model gliding silently across the courtyard. No exhaust, no vibrations, no engine noise, just a smooth, confident movement, as if it had something to prove. The story behind that car didn't begin in a government office or a public announcement. It began much earlier, in a way almost nobody noticed. While global headlines focused on politics, coups, sanctions, and fuel shortages, Burkina Faso was quietly preparing something completely different: the birth of a domestic automotive age. Under President Ibrahim Traoré's leadership, the government moved with unusual speed. They didn't waste time holding endless summits or inviting foreign consultants to write reports. They chose a simple, direct strategy: partner with a country that could build, teach, and transfer technology quickly. That strategy led straight to China. But before anyone heard the name Itawa, teams of young Burkinabe technicians were already inside Chinese factories, learning every detail of electric vehicle assembly. They learned wiring, soldering, battery management, solar integration, quality control, and line sequencing. They didn't just watch, they practiced. They built, they tested, they mastered. When they returned to Burkina Faso, their skills were not symbolic. They were operational. They weren't assistants. They were the workforce needed to assemble a national car brand. The Itawa plant in Ouaga 2000 existed because they could run it. The first cars that left the factory weren't prototypes for display. They weren't fragile concepts created for marketing. They were real vehicles ready for real streets, built for heat, dust, and long driving distances. And when people realized these weren't imported models disguised as local products but actually assembled in Burkina Faso, something shifted. The skepticism turned into curiosity. The curiosity turned into excitement. And the excitement turned into a simple but powerful question sweeping across Ouagadougou. How did a country that never built cars before suddenly manage to assemble fully functioning electric vehicles? And why did China become the key to making it happen? China became the key because it offered something no Western partner ever brought to Burkina Faso: a complete, practical, hands-on transfer of technology. Not speeches, not promises, not conditional aid. When Burkinabe technicians landed in Chinese factories months before the Itawa launch, They weren't taken on tours. They were put straight into workshops, assembly lines, and battery labs. This wasn't theoretical training, it was industrial immersion. In China, the philosophy was simple. If you want to build cars, build them with your own hands. The technicians practiced stripping down electric drivetrains, assembling battery packs, calibrating software systems, and connecting solar charging components. They didn't just learn how a car works, they learned how to produce one. Every mistake they made in training saved a mistake later in Burkina Faso. China's approach was also brutally efficient. No 5-year feasibility studies, no high-level political delays, no long bureaucratic chains. Once the agreement was signed, factories opened their doors, instructors stepped in, and the learning began. Within weeks, the Burkinabe teams were performing tasks that would normally require years of academic training. But China's involvement went deeper than training. It extended to building the assembly line itself. When the Itawa plant in Ouaga 2000 was being set up, Chinese engineers didn't send files or video tutorials. They were physically on site, configuring conveyor systems, installing diagnostic equipment, programming calibration tools, and teaching Burkinabe workers how to operate every station. When the last component was installed, the Chinese engineers didn't tighten the final bolt. They made the Burkinabe team do it. That moment mattered. It marked the transition from "China is helping us" to "we can do this ourselves." Western media tried framing the partnership as dependency, but the technicians who lived the process saw something different. They saw a partner willing to hand over know-how instead of controlling it. They saw a system that treated Africans as future industry builders, not perpetual consumers. And they saw an opportunity to break a decades-long cycle of importing the world's leftovers. The partnership operated on a win-win logic. China got an ally inside the Sahel and a demonstration that its industrial model works globally. Burkina Faso gained a functioning EV assembly plant, a trained workforce, and a national brand with export potential. Most importantly, it gained confidence, the belief that it could build modern machines instead of waiting for someone else to supply them. When the first Itawa Sahel cars were assembled, they weren't just rolling out with batteries and motors. They rolled out with something far more valuable, a workforce capable of producing more. And that left the country with a new curiosity. If the factory had the skills and equipment to assemble electric cars, then the next question became inevitable. What exactly were these technicians building inside that plant? And what models did Burkina Faso actually create for its people?
Burkina Faso has launched its first homemade electric car.
Elle offre un transport respectueux vis-à-vis de l'environnement. Ces véhicules 100% électriques allient innovation et modernité.
They were building a lineup of cars that didn't look experimental, fragile, or foreign. Inside the Itawa plant, the technicians weren't assembling a single flagship model to show off at ceremonies. They were producing an entire family of vehicles designed for real African roads. The first two models, the Itawa Sahel and the Itawa Native, were meant to be accessible, affordable, and easy to maintain. But the real surprise was how practical they were. The Itawa Sahel, which soon became the country's favorite, wasn't some futuristic car that only wealthy elites could afford. It was compact, simple, and built with African realities in mind. It came with Bluetooth, GPS, and most importantly, a solar charging system integrated into the design. In a country where sunlight is abundant but fuel is costly and often scarce, solar power wasn't a luxury, it was the smartest possible feature. The price to fully charge the Sahel was between 3,000 and 6,000 CFA depending on the power source. Meanwhile, a single liter of gasoline hovered around 8 riyal, a price that hammered ordinary citizens. Suddenly, people realized something. The cost of driving an Itawa EV was not just low, it was unbeatable. A fraction of the fuel cost, a fraction of the maintenance cost, and absolutely zero need for imported spare parts or endless repairs. But what really stunned everyone was the Sahel's 330-kilometer range. More than enough to handle daily commutes, village trips, and cross-town transportation without stressing about charging stations. And with a rapid charging time of 30 minutes, the car quickly proved it wasn't dependent on massive infrastructure. You could charge it at home, at local hubs, or with fast chargers placed around Ouagadougou. As confidence grew, the factory expanded production. The Itawa Tenakuru, a hybrid model equipped with 3D cameras and multiple driving modes, entered the lineup. Then came the Itawa Land Elder, an electric pickup built for agriculture, logistics, and rural transport, something Western EV manufacturers rarely even attempt because they don't design with African needs in mind. But the Burkinabe designers and Chinese advisors understood exactly what the country needed: strength, endurance, and low running costs. One of the most interesting reactions came from taxi drivers. They were usually the first to criticize any new vehicle, but this time they were impressed. They didn't care about solar tech or GPS, they cared about profit. And the Sahel delivered. No fuel costs, no constant repairs, no imported spare parts draining their income. For the first time, taxi drivers saw a path to actual savings. People began asking a bigger question. If these cars were this affordable and reliable, how would they perform once they were released into the streets and made part of everyday life? That curiosity led to the next phase of the story. What happened when Itawa vehicles finally went public and started operating as taxis across Ouagadougou? Let's pause for a second to say big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue.
This one. Woo! Guys! Okay, guys, it's already cooling.
When Itawa vehicles finally hit the streets of Ouagadougou, the entire project faced its real test. Factories are controlled environments. Streets are not. Streets expose weak batteries, fragile systems, overheating motors, and badly designed chassis. And taxi drivers, arguably the toughest critics in any city, don't care about national pride. They care about one thing: money. If a car wastes their time or drains their income, they abandon it immediately. But something unexpected happened. The Itawa taxis didn't break down. They didn't overheat. They didn't struggle in traffic or lose power under the Sahel sun. Instead, they performed so well that within months, 30 Itawa electric taxis were in full operation, with plans to expand to 100. Drivers who had spent years fighting with failing engines and expensive fuel suddenly discovered a new reality. They were spending almost nothing on daily operations. The numbers spoke louder than any speech. A taxi driver who used to burn through expensive fuel every day now charges his car for a few thousand CFA. Repairs, which used to eat half his monthly earnings, became rare. There was no oil to change, no exhaust system to fix, no spark plugs to replace. The cars were so quiet that many drivers joked they could finally hear their own thoughts while working. Even more surprising was the reaction of ride-hailing companies. They were among the first to place bulk orders. For them, electric cars weren't just cheaper, they were predictable. Fuel prices fluctuate. Maintenance costs fluctuate. But electricity and solar, those remain stable. Their entire business model became more efficient the moment they switched to Itawa. And something else changed on the streets: people's perception. Burkinabe citizens had grown accustomed to seeing old imported cars with missing parts, faded paint, and decades of wear. Suddenly, brand new taxis with a local logo began appearing everywhere. The quiet hum of an electric motor became the sound of a new era. Some passengers didn't even believe the cars were assembled in Burkina Faso until drivers told them. The shock on their faces showed just how deeply the country had internalized the belief that modern technology must come from outside. But when this disbelief turned into pride, the atmosphere in Ouagadougou shifted. People realized the taxis were not a PR stunt. They were working vehicles, earning money, solving fuel problems, and proving the EV project was not a gamble. It was a functioning system. Naturally, this success forced everyone to see the bigger picture. Electric taxis were only one part of the puzzle. If they were already working this well, then something much larger had to be happening behind the scenes. People began wondering whether the government had a broader plan in motion, one that didn't stop with transportation but touched every part of national development. Which led to the next question: was the electric vehicle project just a standalone achievement or part of a much larger industrial strategy reshaping Burkina Faso's future? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. It wasn't a standalone achievement at all. The electric vehicle project was just one visible piece of a much larger, much more deliberate transformation happening under President Ibrahim Traoré. To understand the real intent behind Itawa, You have to zoom out and look at what Burkina Faso has been quietly building across different sectors. The EV plant didn't appear out of nowhere. It fit directly into a national strategy focused on industrialization, energy sovereignty, and economic independence. Before Itawa was even announced, the government had already launched projects aimed at breaking long-standing dependencies. A national gold refinery was established to process Burkina Faso's own gold instead of exporting it raw. Investments were made in local agriculture, rice processing facilities, tomato factories, fertilizer production, and improved irrigation systems. Solar farms expanded across the country, reducing reliance on imported fuel. Youth training centers grew in number, preparing a new generation of technicians, engineers, and machine operators. When you look at the timeline, a pattern becomes obvious. Every project pointed toward the same objective: to keep more value inside the country. For decades, Burkina Faso's economy has leaked money through fuel imports, raw material exports, used car imports, and foreign service providers. The electric vehicle plant experienced multiple leaks at once: fuel, transportation, spare parts, and aging imports. It wasn't just a car factory, it was an economic tool. The government also understood something fundamental. Industrialization without energy sovereignty is impossible. Electric mobility works only where electricity is reliable and affordable. That is why Burkina Faso's massive push into solar energy wasn't a coincidence. It was part of the same plan. Solar power would eventually fuel homes, farms, industries, and now vehicles. It created a loop where domestic energy could power domestic cars assembled in domestic factories. That level of self-reinforcing independence is rare in the region. And then there was the youth factor. Burkina Faso has a young population, millions under the age of 25. Traditionally, many struggled with unemployment or low-paying informal jobs. The EV project offered something different: real technical careers. Young Burkinabe technicians were trained in Chinese factories, came back with new skills, and entered high-value industrial roles that simply hadn't existed before. This wasn't just job creation, it was capacity creation. You could see the impact in the way people talked about the project. Older generations saw it as a sign that Burkina Faso was finally entering a new era. Younger people saw it as proof that they didn't need to leave the country to be part of a modern, technological world. And across government offices, the project was viewed as a model. If cars can be assembled locally, why not tractors, refrigerators, motorcycles, or buses? The picture became clearer. The EV project was not an isolated success, but a building block in a long-term national redesign. Which leads to the final, most important question. If Burkina Faso has already built the foundation of this industrial shift, what does it plan to do next with its new electric mobility industry? What Burkina Faso plans to do next is far bigger than simply increasing production. The long-term goal is expansion beyond national borders. The government and Itawa leadership have said it openly. The project is designed to move from local adoption to regional dominance, then continental presence, and eventually international competitiveness. This isn't ambition for the sake of ambition. It is a calculated move based on demand, geography, and capability. West Africa is the first target. The region faces the same challenges Burkina Faso does: expensive fuel, unreliable old vehicles, and rising transportation costs that undermine both mobility and economic activity. Countries like Mali, Niger, Togo, Benin, and Ghana could all benefit from low-cost electric vehicles, especially ones built for heat, rough roads, and long distances. With the right price point and the right feature set, Itawa cars could become the default everyday vehicle across the Sahel and West Africa. But the plan doesn't stop there. The company wants to scale production to the point where Itawa becomes a pan-African brand, competing with the second-hand European imports that dominate African streets. And this is where the national strategy connects again. If Burkina Faso expands its solar infrastructure, strengthens its battery capabilities, and increases assembly capacity, it can offer Africa something no one else has: a new car built on the continent, for the continent, at a price Africans can actually afford. Internally, the team at Itawa is already preparing for this. Engineers trained in China are now training new technicians in Burkina Faso, creating a multiplying effect in local expertise. Plans are being discussed for expanding assembly zones, introducing new models, and eventually developing a fully Burkinabe-designed EV from scratch. If the country succeeds in developing its own battery production or battery recycling capability, it would completely change its industrial position in the region. Meanwhile, the government understands that export success requires reliability. That is why they are investing in infrastructure around the plant. Supply chains, charging hubs, spare parts distribution, and partnerships with transport unions. They know an EV brand is not built on one car alone. It's built on an ecosystem that supports those cars long after purchase. Internationally, Itawa officials have already expressed confidence that they can one day sell not just within Africa, but beyond it. While that may sound bold, the logic is not unrealistic. The global EV market is shifting rapidly, with many countries looking for low-cost alternatives as Western manufacturers struggle with high prices. If Itawa can maintain quality while keeping costs down, it could find openings in emerging markets in Asia, Latin America, and even parts of Europe. At the center of all this is a simple idea. Burkina Faso is proving that industrialization is not exclusive to wealthy nations. A landlocked Sahel country built an electric mobility industry in under a year. It trained its own youth. It partnered strategically. It executed efficiently. And now, with Itawa preparing to cross borders, the final question isn't about Burkina Faso at all. It's about the world. If a Sahel nation can build and export solar-powered EVs from scratch, what excuse do larger, richer countries have for not doing the same? Let us know in the comments section. Will other African nations follow up? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.